When we're talking about training the trail hip in the 90-90 for internal rotation, we really want to understand the different sensations that we should and should not feel. So since we're actually really trying to get after the joint capsule, the sensation of feeling a stretch, a very intense stretch through here, is what we're after. Now, we're also training hip abduction, so finding and feeling a stretch through the groin is perfectly fine and normal. The things that are going to dictate between feeling either one of these things are A, how far I can really drop my butt towards the ground, and B, how upright my chest is. If my chest is more upright, I'm putting myself in more hip abduction. If I'm able to kind of lean out to the side a little bit and then rotate more towards the ground, I should get more into the capsule. Both of these are valuable. If we are trying to get after the capsule, but you're not able to get here without losing some sort of positioning that takes away the real tension we want, then maybe it makes more sense to go with another regression and follow the same cues. Another great way to really find and visualize this is if I want you to think that the gray is going to represent my femur or the bone that my hip is going to have come into my hip socket right here, and I want that femur to actually go towards the ground, and I also want my pelvis or the white to go back and rotate away from the femur. So these two things going in different directions is what actually lights up the tension in the capsule. So if people are sitting in the 90-90 shrugged up like this and trying to get to here, like I did for a long time, that won't really help you very much. It's not until we're able to sink into it that we start feeling the right things. If you are one of those people where this is hiked up on you and we're holding on and just your obliques are cramping, you're probably not able to really sink into it. Another great way to think about it is almost as if this part of your hip is getting closer to the ground, this part of your knee is coming up, and then you're actually getting over it. So if I think about, I feel as if the right side of my hip is higher than my left, if I can get those things to pull and then pull me into it as I rotate, now I'm feeling exactly what I want to feel, and I'm able to be efficient with my PAILs and rails here. When we do implement PAILs and rails for our trail hip, we definitely want to, again, make sure you find the correct sensation. Spend 2 minutes with that nice big deep breaths where we're actually calming down where we feel the restriction or what's holding us back by maybe 4 to 6 second exhales and really getting a good focus for fully exhaling, getting rid of absolutely everything. We can think about melting, sinking into the ground. Even if you're here and you're just trying to stay straight up, you can still think about that sinking into the ground and finding that sensation. And then when we actually do go into our actual PAILs contraction, my favorite cue is to think about driving the foot through the ground as if it was scooping. Now, the reason we say the foot is because if you think about the foot moving through the ground, it's going to be more of a rotational force than as if I just drove my knee down. With that being said, you want to go through the process of irradiation, not only tensioning your core first, but then tensioning your hip, as if there was a chain that moved from the midline to the toe. We do this because if we tension the foot first, there's a good chance that you're going to load the ankle more than you would the hip, and even more so again with the knee. If we think about tensioning the hip first and getting after the actual tissue that we're looking for to contract, that's going to make the overall endeavor much more successful. Now, another cue that I like is not only trying to scoop it through there, but also almost as if I'm trying to drag my right foot forward through the ground. The motion I'm thinking about is like this, but by pushing down hard through the heel and the knee using my hip, it doesn't slide, it just stays there and tenses up the right way. Now, when I do my rails contraction, I'm really thinking about trying to lift my foot, and I also can use these blocks to illustrate that point. So the same way that we wanted to actually keep our butt down, we also want to be able to stop moving through the pelvis. So if I go into my rails contraction and all it is really this, I'm not actually accessing what I want. I want to really be able to feel TFL and some other stuff, trying to lift the foot and further internally rotate the femur, but independently from the pelvis. So by putting this here, if I let that sink on there and then I try to lift, If I lift off of it, I know that I'm not moving through my femur, I'm not getting that rotation like we wanted in the capsule, I'm just kind of faking it with a coupled motion. So those are the keys there for the PAILs and rails, and you can do the same cues from really every regression, no matter where you are, they would not really change. When we're training the lead hip in the 90-90, specifically for external rotation, it's very important, again, to find the right sensations and be able to really get yourself into a successful position. Now, the sensation that we're looking for here is really a stretch on the outside, but it's a deeper sensation because we're really trying to get after the capsule. When we think about a stretch out there, sometimes people will reference pigeon, which is in the general area, but this is what we're looking for in terms of the stretch we're looking for here is going to be much deeper. Now, the key is to be able to actually stay long in the spine and even tilt the pelvis back. So in this portion right here, I want to really try to be able to pull that back without having to round when I come forward. So if I'm able to pull this back, I should start to see and feel something get on tension in the capsule and maybe even do a little rotation. So it might even be a little bit of rotating away, staying tall, and then as I go forward, I should feel a stretch. What often happens is seeing students around you, maybe just not being aware and having a mirror that you can look at, we'll often try our best to get so far that it just comes at the expense of our spine. And if I let everything sit back like this, especially if you see your knee off the ground, then you know that you definitely went too far, okay? And then what we would really need to do is try our best to regain the position that actually gets the tension in the right spot. When we are starting to implement PAILs and rails for our front hip in the 90-90, we want to get into our end range after about 2 minutes of breathing, sinking in and finding the best sensation we can look for. We want to really stay in there and then go into our PAILs. Now our PAILs is really driving everything through the ground. We want to tension the hip first after we lock in our midline, and we can start to think about irradiating even through the ankle to get, again, that kind of emphasis on more rotation, as if you were doing a capsule car for the hip. Now, the other thing that we can think about is really getting as much tension throughout the entire body without losing our spine. So sometimes when we start to think about tensing our abs, especially if a lot of the abs you've been doing are just pushing your lower back into the ground, a lot of people are going to actually flex, which is going to take a stretch off of the tissue, which is where we want to be able to stay here, drive down. When we go into our rails portion, I'll often show people that it's as if you were trying to lift your foot first and then your knee. So the sensation of our rails is this. You could even try to hold that up as you go into it, which is basically a kinetic stretch. Your rails are to try to lift that into your chest. Now during our rails portion, the same situation happens. If I try to lift and all I did was move through my spine, then I'm probably not doing too good of a job at feeling that stretch increase. On all of our PAILs and rails, what we can say is, do you feel the stretch increasing during your rails? If it's a yes, for sure, there's probably a really good chance that we're in a good position and doing a good job. If you were going to regress it, you could totally regress it just by being a little bit taller, or adding that there, or even adding that to both, which will make it easier on everything, and you'll be able to get it even further while maintaining your spine. And there really is no better regression or progression for me and my students than actually using the table as we've shown you guys.